So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what are the attributes of, this is not working. So you can lose it a second. So at first I gave you a bit of an introduction of what I do. So I'm a neuroscientist, and what we're going to talk about today are some of the attributes of a teenage brain that makes adolescents particularly well suited for entrepreneurial activities and for promoting ideas that truly can have a world presence in terms of their effect. So what we have here is an illustration of the human brain, sort of cut in what's called a sagittal section, and you're looking at it from this position. And what you can see is the brain regions that are involved in what we call decision-making processes. And so we're going to discuss the teenage brain in terms of decision-making, or how the brain functions to make choices. Now, decision-making is indeed a complex series of events that's orchestrated by multiple brain regions. For example, in the middle of the brain, deep in the middle of the brain, we have brain regions called the nucleus accumbens and the ventral pallidum. The nucleus accumbens is very much involved in reward-mediated behaviors, and the ventral pallidum is involved in social bonding. So these two brain regions are tightly interrelated, and it's important to understand that reward-mediated behaviors are what we do when we are eating or drinking, or when a mother is taking care of her baby. It's important for the individual or for the species to reward themselves or to have good feelings about these behaviors. So all of us have these centers in our brain. What you also notice is that there's brain regions over sort of also deep in the brain that's called the amygdala and the hippocampus. These brain regions are involved in learning and memory. And in particular, the amygdala is interesting because it's involved in what we call emotional memories. Emotional memories are those things that happen to you when something of great emotional strain has occurred in your life. For example, somebody made you very mad, or you got your favorite piece of chocolate cake. In both of those situations, it's an emotionally charged event, and your amygdala is going to remember that event. Now, overlaying these deep brain structures is our cortex. And the part of the cortex that is particularly important in decision-making actually are two subfields. One is called the orbital frontal cortex, and one is called the prefrontal cortex. And these two brain regions sort of act in opposition in terms of decision-making processes, with the orbital frontal cortex sort of being the gas pedal in a car, and the prefrontal cortex being your brake system. So how these happen to interact in terms of decision-making processes are sort of illustrated here. So for example, if something that you know of, you like a lot, you're able to acquire, let's say a donut. We like donuts, it's food, our brain rewards ourselves for eating, and we remember through our amygdala that we've eaten donuts before and we really like donuts. So what happens is these reward-related memories then start to talk to the orbital frontal cortex, the gas pedal, and we may be very motivated to go buy donuts and eat 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 donuts. But then we have this inhibitory control part of our cortex, this executive function that's saying, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't eat so many donuts. You know, it's a lot of sugar, it's not so healthy, maybe we should eat an apple instead. So between your orbital frontal cortex and your orbital frontal cortex and your prefrontal cortex, based on decisions that are reward motivated, then we can make a choice. Are we going to eat an apple? Are we going to eat a donut? Are we going to eat a dozen donuts? So then the question is, how does these different pathways translate into the brain of an adolescent? And we can determine this now because of some very high-profile and high-powered imaging studies. For example, those that are done by Dr. Sowell, and I'm showing you some of their work here in this lower right-hand corner. And what you're seeing is a three-dimensional representation of a brain that's color-coded to indicate the parts of the brain that are changed between an adolescent until they grow up to be an adult. And what you might notice is that there's a lot of purple over here in these brain regions that overlay that prefrontal cortex. Purple is the biggest change that Dr. Sawell saw in the brain moving from an adolescent brain to an adult. So what does this mean in terms of decision making? What can we do with an adolescent brain that clearly doesn't have the same brake system that an adult brain may have? Well, this sort of can be told in terms of how these decisions are being made in a more complex scenario than choosing between an apple and a donut. So let's say that we're talking about something as difficult to make a choice about as skydiving. And how does the brain look like for an adult talking about skydiving versus the brain decision-making process by a teenager who's considering skydiving? Well, the adult might say, you know, I remember flying, I liked it, it was fun, and these kinds of reward memories are making me kind of curious. I'm kind of motivated to go skydiving. But then that inhibitory control kicks in and says, ooh, what if I break my legs? If I break my legs, I may not be able to go to work, and if I can't go to work and I lose my job, you know, I have to take care of my family. Maybe I won't go skydiving. Contrast that to a teenager. So a teenager says, ooh, you know, I went bungee jumping, I really, really liked it. It was really fun. I had lots of brain rewards. I have lots of good memories of this. I'm really motivated to do that, and you know what? So what if I break my legs? Break my legs. I think I'm gonna go skydiving. So you see these brain regions when you have a different balance of the prefrontal cortex and the orbital frontal cortex, the decision-making process may be quite different. So then how does this play into how we're going to capitalize those particular aspects of the teenage brain that might be really well suited for entrepreneurial activities? Well, let's walk through these one by one. So for example, if you talk about your amygdala, remember your amygdala is the seat of your emotional memories. So maybe you see a homeless man on the same street corner every day, and you remember this, and you start to have this passion about the fact that I have this homeless man sitting on the street corner. And the teenage brain will take this passion, and it becomes a powerful generator to the other thought processes that are going on in their decision-making circuit. So capitalize your passion. This is what teenagers do extraordinarily well. They're highly passionate. Then let's talk about are there reward centers in a teenage brain? We know that teenagers are very much driven by positive reinforcement, all right? So if you're a passionate teenager and you've decided, I'm going to do something about this homeless man, what you might want to do is to create a situation where you have positive reinforcements that are going to allow you to effect a change in that situation that you're passionate about. So what you might want to do is to assemble a group of your peers that are like-minded, and just by the fact that you're bringing your friends on board is rewarding to you. Because we know that social bonding is very important in humans, and particularly peers and the feelings that they have for each other are important for a teenage brain. So use that to your advantage. Create a team of like-minded peers. Interact frequently. We know that if you're with your friends, and these are good influencers, and they're like-minded to you, the social bonding will get stronger and stronger the more frequently you interact, and you know what? Your brain reward centers will actually be engaged more and more. Emphasize the positive. As the team leader, we know that positive reinforcement for teenagers moves mountains much more than negative reinforcement. If things go wrong, learn from your mistakes, turn into a positive. That's what the teenage brain is going to respond to. What about our orbital frontal cortex, that gas pedal? Well, use it to your advantage. That's what the teenage brain does well. Go for it. You've got high passion, highly motivated, highly positive reinforcing individuals working together. Then use this to embrace your motivated brain. You will get more things done than anyone else could that has just a regular brain that's not so passionate. Then finally, what do we do about this prefrontal cortex? Now we talked about the fact that the prefrontal cortex may be not fully developed in the teenage brain. So my recommendation is outsource it, right? So I'm saying find someone with a big frontal cortex. Now, aside from doing imaging studies, that may be difficult to ascertain. However, if you find an experienced adult who has a vision that's along the same path as your passion, then they may work very well to the team that you've already assembled of your teenagers. And a passionate advisor is just that. They're the advisor. You're still the captain of the ship. You're driving the car. You've got the gas pedal. But it's nice to have an advisor there that has the experience and enough life experiences underneath their belt to be able to put on that brake and to be able to counsel you in terms of what these outputs might come to fruition with down the road and in the future. So my situation that I've sort of diagrammed here for you is to take that teenage brain and make it a team brain, one that capitalizes on the positive attributes of that highly motivated, highly rewarded, highly innovative teenager, and then be able to outsource your advisor information and come together with a team, because I'm quite sure with this type of formula, you will certainly have a strong road towards success. Thank you.